Brothers y brothercitas, me tuve que chutar el debate de estos dos, de Candace Owens y Andrew Wilson, para que ustedes no lo tuvieran que hacer. Es un debate en el que obviamente Candace Owens pues defiende sus teorías de conspiración acerca de que el que desvió a Charlie Kirk no es el desvividor, a pesar de que hay pruebas contundentes que en mi forma de ver demuestran que sí lo fue. Y bueno, pues por el otro lado, Andrew Wilson, que pues también piensa que las pruebas que hay son contundentes y que literalmente el desvividor de Charlie Kirk fue Taylor Robinson. Pero Candace Owens tiene que, así que, pues debatir y defender estas teorías que ella misma ha inventado, basándose en no sé qué, porque nunca ha enseñado pruebas contundentes para probar todas sus teorías de conspiración en las que dice que Taylor Robinson no es el desvividor. Sin embargo, se ha hecho millonaria, brothers, literalmente millonaria con las vistas, diciendo sus teorías de conspiración y pues siempre pedaleando las mismas teorías, caray, que en mi forma de ver yo la he expuesto, la he desmentido aquí en mi canal un chorro de veces. Pues todas sus teorías son súper falsas y Andrew Wilson, que es el que la debatió, estaba harto de oír sus teorías y dijo: yo te quiero debatir, yo quiero que me digas, que me pruebes tus teorías en un debate. Y pues ahorita van a ver que no comprobó ninguna. Nada más sigue diciendo que no es cierto, no es cierto. Es muy fácil, en mi forma de ver, pues de tratar de negar algo sin probarlo. O sea, tú puedes decir que 2 y 2 son 4. Si yo voy a estar aquí diciéndote, pues no es cierto, no son, y te doy teorías de que el 2 y el 1 pueden también ser 4, y te digo que el 2 más 0 también son 4, y no te compruebo por qué el 2 y 2 no son 4, pues está cañón debatir con alguien así, porque dices, güey, pues puedes mentir, decir mil cosas, pero 2 y 2 son 4. Así está Candace Owens. Es muy inteligente para hacer lo que hace, brothers, y pues se ha hecho millonaria y ha confundido a muchísima gente. O sea, el casi, hay pruebas de que Taylor Robinson ya él mismo confesó varias veces en textos, en mensajes que le dejó escritos al novio en su casa, mensajes de textos después de que desvivió a Charlie. Antes de desvivir a Charlie también le escribió. Todo está más que claro, pero Candace Owens sigue diciendo que no es el desvividor, que es algo, el gobierno lo quiere poner como el desvividor y bla, bla, bla. Brothers, chequen esto. Vamos a ver lo que dice Candace Owens acerca de esto. Es ridículo, pero se defiende muy bien. Por eso es que es inteligente y por eso es millonaria, porque se defiende muy bien y enreda a la gente por todos lados y se sale como ardilla, que no la pueden agarrar, pero, o sea, vamos a ver esto.
That her fact is not going to change, that among the prints, his was the most degraded. So I'm asking you to address that. How could that be possible?
Let's give it, let's just grant this for a second as a possibility that his fingerprints were degraded.
It's not a possibility. It's a fact. The person who took
hang
it.
On. I'm just granting it for the sake of argument.
You should grant it because it's a fact that she presented.
So now it's granted. So what?
What do you mean, so what?
Yeah, so what? What does that prove?
It proves that if his prints were the most degraded amongst 5 of them, you're going to have to explain how that's possible if he's the one that recently fired the weapon.
Yeah, so wait a second. You're saying that it's an impossibility that if his fingerprints are the most degraded,
I'm telling you to explain it. You're the gunsmith.
Well,
so
wait a
explain
second. How would a gunsmith give an analysis on fingerprints or DNA? Do you think that I work in a DNA laboratory with fingerprints?
So your answer is I don't know. You can just say you don't know.
But
you
I
don't
did.
have to.
But I did.
No, you said so what?
Yeah,
so say, I don't know. I actually don't have an explanation for that,
prove,
Candace.
Though, is my question.
Well, I think that what it would prove is that it is a more viable theory that people who had stronger prints on the gun may have used it more recently.
Did they say who else had fingerprints on the gun?
They named Matt Robinson explicitly.
Okay.
And this was a part of the testimony where she was speaking about how they got samples of elimination samples from the home of Amber Robinson, Matt Robinson, and Lance Twiggs. Those are the 3 names they named.
So are you saying that Twiggs
Would you
fingerprints?
like me to finish my statement?
I just want to make sure I'm clarifying.
I'm trying to finish the answer, but it can't be clarified until the answer comes out of my mouth.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
This was a portion of her testimony where she was explaining how they got elimination samples from the home. And she named Matt Robinson, Amber Robinson, and Lance Twiggs as the elimination samples that she was using. And so she explicitly said, some of them, so we can assume 2 out of the 3, were their prints were found on the gun. She explicitly named Matt Robinson. as someone who had prints on the gun, and then said there were 5 people that they had taken that sample from. And again, what's also relevant here is the earlier testimony, which came from the FBI forensics analyst, I believe it was on day 2, where she said that when you're using those mixtures and those samples and you get up to 5+, it's really hard to make any sort of a determination. So both of those things are relevant. If you can't explain why his prints are the most degraded and you're saying he is the shooter, it's not really a so what. It's an open-ended question that people have a right to pursue. It's not a conspiracy. It's actually proof of my claim that there is evidence that he was set up as a patsy.
That wouldn't prove anything about him being a patsy.
It said it's evidence to support the claim that he could have been set up as a patsy.
So this is why I said earlier, so what? Because even if it's the case, this doesn't have an explanation for it yet. Evidence in your corner for Tyler Robinson being a patsy.
Okay,
hang on. I didn't cut you off, right? You would need to actually explain how this would demonstrate Tyler Robinson. This is tied into Robinson being a patsy. Are you claiming that these fingerprints were Lance Twiggs or that he had any DNA there?
I'm saying that it could be Matt Robinson. It could be Amber Robinson. That sort of information is going to come out during the trial.
How would that tie into the idea that he's a patsy,
Yes,
though?
because if his is the most degraded prints and the information that I shared on my platform is true, that this gun was given to Tyler Robinson as an heirloom. I had conversation with members of the Robinson family, Twiggs family, both of them. You know, like I said, we're not just dreaming. And if we're having those conversations and they told me that that gun was only given to Tyler Robinson because it was a family heirloom. Okay, so it was his grandfather's gun or great-grandfather's gun. Okay. I don't remember the difference. I don't remember which one it was. And so he got it because he's the firstborn. So, but he's not much of a shooter, is what I was told. And so he has this because he inherited it, essentially. So if I get something from my grandpa and I put it up on the shelf and I own this, you could see that could be.
How do we get to the patsy part?
You don't let me ever get to the end of the sentence. So how could we get to the patsy part
Okay,
if I can't get to the end of the sentence?
I'll wait patiently till we get to the
So that could be a reasonable explanation as to why there was dust in the barrel, because he doesn't often shoot this weapon and he is indeed a fisher. And it could also be a reasonable explanation for why we have Matt Robinson's prints on this. Obviously, Lance Twiggs, even if he has prints on things, they live together. That doesn't really mean anything. But that could demonstrate that somebody took his weapon and put it somewhere. His prints are the most degraded. Somebody else's prints, there's more presence of somebody else's prints, and that could demonstrate that somebody is taking items from his house and putting it into various places. But it also could
demonstrate nothing. So the problem that you have here is that this is pure conjecture.
No,
this is not evidence that Tyler Robinson is a patsy. It's only evidence that you have conjectured up that, if it's the case that these are the more degraded prints, then therefore that means must be patsy because dad's fingerprints on gun.
I didn't say must be patsy.
Describe how this actually links in to Robinson being a patsy.
Okay, I just described that for you, so I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you, so I'm going to move on from that. But to just go back to your point about this is not evidence, you can't make that claim because the entire basis for why you think that there's evidence for Tyler Robinson being the person that took the shot is based off of a hearing under Utah 1102 rules, meaning that they are doing the exact same thing that I am doing. This is the state. You said you're here to represent the state. Well, did you watch the preliminary hearing?
I didn't say I was here to represent the state.
The state's position you think is strong and convincing.
What I'm here to do is represent my own opinion.
You said in your opening statement,
based on the evidence presented so far by the state
has presented
I find it convincing.
Evidence under Utah's 1102 rule.
But this doesn't demonstrate any patsy behavior.
That's very important because that rule is hearsay. So you can't say at the same time, Candace, you're not allowed to. And what that means under the Utah rule, which I'm sure you know, because I'm sure you watched the preliminary hearing and yourself understand what that means, is that the entire hearing was hearsay. It means none of that information that was presented is going to be allowed. The majority of it, the overwhelming majority of it is not going to be allowed at the trial. They're allowed to present when it's just a probative hearing.
I don't think all the evidence that was put in was hearsay.
Okay, you didn't watch this case.
But not only that, no.
This is a huge point. This is crazy that you don't know this. That your entire brand of saying you don't have evidence falls apart when the entire preliminary hearing is based off of hearsay. In fact, Lance's testimony before they had about an hour debate, actually maybe it was more than an hour debate before he sat, and they said this is not going to be allowed. You wouldn't even be allowed to do this. We'd be able to cross-examine cross-examine him. The questions that they're asking Lance are all leading. And what did he say? Well, I'm the magistrate under Utah Constitution, 1102. It is my job to allow all of this so we can see if the state has enough here that we can then move to a trial, which will then, they would not allow this stuff. They would say we get to cross-examine Lance. Lance
but
just
you're
can't
arguing
willy-nilly
things I'm not disputing.
But the entire substance of your argument is that people can't infer off of evidence.
No,
That's what you're saying
it's
to
not.
me. When you say Candace,
Here,
you
I'll
can't
give you
talk
the
about the degraded
argument
prince, which is a
now.
fact.
Yeah, I'm not
and then
saying
infer
that.
off of that
Didn't say that.
Tyler could have been a patsy.
You're just
when you tweeted, I think that this evidence is overwhelming. When they say that looks like Tyler Robinson's car, he drives a similar. Okay, they are inferring that that's Tyler Robinson.
Can you walk me through the inference? So that I understand.
It's not a fact. It's not a fact. When you show a blurry image, which you kept citing that we have
No,
images.
I'm talking about your inference that the fingerprints, even if they're degraded, equals patsy. How do you get that inference?
I didn't say it equals patsy. I think it is enough evidence that it should be explored, which is exactly what this preliminary was in the inverse.
That's not in dispute. What's in dispute is when you said, I'm using this as evidence that he could have been a patsy. I'm asking, how do you get the inference to patsy from that?
Because what I am saying is that it shows that somebody else had more DNA presence on that gun than Tyler Robinson did. So it is plausible, which is all they're doing. They're presenting plausibility based off of the facts, okay? It is plausible that somebody just took his gun and put it there. That's it.
Is there equally...
that's how it works.
And is there equally 100 other plausible explanations?
I think that's the reason why most people are exploring when things don't make sense.
Got it.
So yes, at the beginning of that, this is how the court process works.
So
just so we're clear,
if there's 100 other plausible explanations, then Candace, why is it that we should go with this idea that it was a patsy?
I'm not saying that we should go with the idea that it was a patsy. I am saying that there is.
I thought that defended your whole claim today.
My whole claim was that there is more evidence that he has set up as a patsy.
How does that equal evidence of patsy?
I don't know how many times I can say this. Like I'm saying that I am using the exact same mechanism that you are accepting for some reason in the Utah courtroom.
Yeah.
Right. To say, I'm going to look at the evidence and I'm going to infer an alternative theory. So you just saw the states and you're accepting it. And they have not presented any concrete facts. You listed on your own Twitter that what you found to be convincing was something that looked like his car pulled into the driveway, a blurry image.
No, I didn't.
A standard white guy coming up the steps that could literally be anyone.
This never happened.
Can we get a fact check on that? Can we pull up his tweet where he goes over the
I didn't say that's what convinced me.
When you actually didn't say it's what convinced me, but you said this is the evidence that you found to be overwhelming, and you named, I believe, actually 5 things. I think you said it was his car. You said it was.
Well, there's multitudes of things that I find.
You just
to be
said you didn't say
evidence.
it, so we're going to get a fact check on that. You did.
Go ahead.
You said the blurry images coming up the steps. Quite literally, when Officer Bagley testified, they talk about when I'm talking about making inference. This is the most I thought was the most absurd testimony I've ever heard. And pardon me, it was actually David Hull. They asked him a question. How did you know the guy in the maroon shirt was the same as the guy that came up the stairs later that was wearing the American flag black shirt? And he said, they're wearing the same shoes.
Why is that absurd?
That's how you decided these two are the same people. Oh, wow. What a scientific. They're both wearing Converses. Okay. That's an absurd thing to say. That is not evidence that these are the same people if we're both wearing Converses. That was what he said. That's what flew on the stand.
But I still don't understand how that would be absurd. If somebody,
it's an absurd thing.
For instance, if somebody were to change their clothes but keep the same shoes on, wouldn't you utilize the shoes to try to track that person? If
the
they were
idea that on a college campus, 2 people wearing this totally different outfits, but both wearing Converses can't happen is such an absurdity that I don't even need to argue. I just think that my opinion is that she should be sat down and questioned.
But you're not sure if she hasn't been.
Yeah, and you're not sure if she has been either. So, like I said, I feel like now you're just kind of filling the air with nonsense. Because during points we want to make sure that you go in there and you defend Erica. And I have to say, I don't think you've done an extraordinary job at that.
But I'm not here to defend Erica. The thing is, though, is
that since 4 out of 5 of the clips that you had on the ready when we asked you guys ahead of time, I mean, I want to just assert how professionally we have dealt with this debate. As you can see, we have not planned any gotcha clips for Andrew. I expressed to him that what we were going to do was just to use people for fact checks, and because I might not remember something, or I do remember something and you're saying no, and that is what I think will register to people as very
Well, wait,
fair.
I expressly
We did not take out of
what?
context clips of Andrew
But
to
I
try to repair.
expressly said
Please
that
don't
I
cut
was
me
going to
off.
bring claims,
We did not.
right?
No, when you said you were going to bring claims that
Your
you would want me to
claims.
speak to, you didn't say, I intend on sitting you down with out of contexted clips to which we said to you before in an email. Any clips that you want to share with us, send it over. Let's assert a debate claim so that we can both be ready to respond to it. This just
That's not really what happened.
well. What didn't happen?
The way that you're framing the exchange, that's
do you
not
mean?
that's not actually what happened. We were negotiating. It is true we negotiated out the claim itself, right? Which one's going to take which position. I wanted to make sure that I had at least an hour and a half on mine, and you got the time for yours to question me. We did. We got through your hour and a half on mine, roughly an hour and a half now on mine. That's basically how this went.
But in the beginning, I did not take an hour and a half to just pull out of context clips with Andrew. I actually debated the substance of what's going on in this trial and this hearing. And I do think that you fell short of that.
There's nothing hang on.
And
There's nothing
did not
here
say,
except
I'm
holding
just
you to
gonna
account
get
for
you
your
to say
claims.
yes or no. Well, we were supposed to be debating the case
This
and
is
whether
part of
or
the
not
case.
there was overwhelming evidence.
These are your claims about the case.
No, you then admitted that now you're getting into another sphere and you want to talk about the transcendentals and things that I've
And
said.
we got through.
And like 4 out of 5 of your clips are about Erica Kirk. So the general
I
perception
don't think 4 out of 5 even
is
were.
your turning points horse.
Oh,
I
so you
think
just-
quite
just-
a few
you
of
just-
them were.
you
Were
just-
there 3
just made it
Ericas
up?
or 4?
So you're just making stuff
Can
up?
we get a count of how many were about Erica? I feel like
I think it was 3.
3. Okay,
Yeah,
3. I
3.
said 4.
But those are extraordinary
sorry.
claims, which is why you're asked about
Okay,
them.
well,
right?
okay, but the point being is now you're veering into trying to get me to defend my opinions, and then you completely shirk responsibility
Your
when I
claims.
point out yours. No, they're not claims. When
No,
you
they're
tweet
claims.
Erica is too retarded, you go, that's just whatever, and then you move on.
That's a claim and I'm responsible for the claim.
Well, earlier when I brought it up, you said that it was tongue in cheek.
Yes, sure. That's me responding to your criticism of the claim. That's all I'm doing here.
I was interested, and
I'm happy to get into also the Patsy stuff now, if you would like to.
well,
Your
that
team
was
has one more
supposed to
clip
be
they want
the
to play
whole
One
from
more,
7 days
okay,
ago.
sorry.
They got one
They
more
had
clip.
to.
and
We
then
were
can
getting
go to
into the
Patsy.
Patsy stuff, and you stopped it. The defense argue on behalf of the prosecution, saying it's not them and it's not the SBI, it's the FBI that's holding on to things. Is the FBI took everything. The FBI took the gun. The FBI took initially the screwdriver, and then when I heard testimony about the things that they found that were suspicious. Example being the backpack. That's something that really bothers me. That they say they traced the shooter, they traced the route that he went on, and then there was an abandoned. We know it looks like he's wearing some sort of a backpack. We know that there was an abandoned backpack found at the bus stop in front of a library, and they felt that this should be taken into evidence. They took it. The FBI, this was the testimony of Amanda Baker, I believe her last name is, but you might want to fact check that because I think I'm blending last names. She was the forensics for the FBI. And then she says she gets a call on the 13th and they stop testing on this backpack because they find that the backpack actually belongs to somebody on Charlie's team. But if you know the map of the layout of the campus, you're going, well, what the hell are they doing all the way up? This is nowhere near anywhere. And by the way, that's not an acceptable answer for why you just gave it back. That's like, why would you give it back? You're acting like no one's ever been killed by somebody on their team before, right? So I found that to be very strange that it was on the exact route that the alleged gunman ran, and that their excuse was we just gave it back because we heard that this belonged to somebody on Charlie's team. So that to me is, this is why the investigation itself feels underwhelming. When you learn, and this is completely crazy to me, that some of the artifacts that Charlie was wearing were immediately returned to Erica. That's absurd. That is absurd. Everything should be in evidence. When you learn that the car that they carried Charlie in to go to the hospital, they had immediately towed, cleaned, and back up for resale, that's absurd. That should be sitting in evidence. And any police officer that you speak to will say, or a person that's been involved in a crime will say, I didn't get my stuff back for years. That had nothing to do with anything. It was just around. And they kept it into evidence until the trial was over and it has to be approved. I think somebody said by the attorney general has to sign off on giving you those objects back. And we were told this is all fine. And we see, this is just one example, Erica holding the crucifix. That should be in evidence. Irrespective of if you feel bad for her and think she should have it and it's sweet, that should be in evidence. Immediately paving over the crime scene. This is like the craziest thing ever. This like defies common sense. You immediately, and when you heard the guy who did it, actually go up on a podcast and explain, I got the call. They said it was a paver emergency. I've never in my entire career heard of a paver emergency. They had already had someone come up and dig up the dirt. So by the time he got there on Sunday, the dirt had already been dug up for him to lay down pavers. That is what people are looking at and going, this is weird. There needs to be answers for why this was done. And he tells us the call came from the feds and the governor's office. UVU's washed their hands of it. And what he's saying sounds true, because we heard during the testimony, one person described the regions of who was in control of everything. The feds were in control of the courtyard. So in order for anybody to have paved anything, that was federal territory, so to speak. I'm maybe not using that in the best cop term, but the feds were in control of the courtyard. So these are things that I think should be answered for. Why are we doing things differently than you would in any other criminal scenario of keeping the evidence until we know more, until we're confident, the various decoys. I did it. It just doesn't look right.